it is Wagner, it is Russian. So the real crude, rude, violent, barbaric imperialism. Ukraine is not Monaco. Ukraine is not Liechtenstein. Ukraine is a great country with a great tradition and with a great military tradition. Even when I debated with him 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of my friends told me, but how can you even consider such a moron, such a stupid fascist?
Hello, my name is Michael Ziger, and every week I'm speaking to the unique guests. Today I'm going to interview Bernard-Henri Levy, one of the most prominent French philosophers, journalists and politicians. Hello, Mr. Levy, thank you for your time. I'd like to start with the memories of your book that brought you popularity and fame. Many years ago, you wrote a book, Barbarism with a Human Face, and it had several very outrageous statements that Hitler is still alive, that Stalin is still among us, and Hitler has won the war actually. And now we see this war, and now probably we can rethink all those messages you had in that book. Do you still think that do you think that you were right writing that, and that it was some kind of prediction that you foresaw Hitler, who is still alive and who has won that war, and Stalin, who is still among us? How do you see your views in the context of this war?
Yeah. When I said 45 years ago that Hitler was still alive, I meant that the ghost of Hitler was still alive. I meant that the denazification of the world has not been done, and Putin today is the proof of that. The very existence of Putin, the fact that Putin is possible, the fact that the invasion of Ukraine is possible, and before that Chechnya, and in between Syria, this very fact is a proof that the ghost of Hitler and of Stalin is still around. Yes, that's exactly what I meant when I wrote Barbarism with a Human Face, which was, by the way, at this time published in Russian in what we called samizdat. Mm-hmm. It was a secret publication under the radar of the post-Stalinian Brezhnev authorities at this time. And the book was read by some dissidents, my friends of this time in Russia. And yes, Putin is the last avatar of the ghost of Hitler, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that time when you were writing that book, and you initially were a revolutionary of 1968, then you broke up with your ex-socialist friends and started your fight against those totalitarian ideas. The situation was very peculiar because a lot of people in Europe empathized with the Soviet Union. Now we have the situation when Europe has a lot of so-called Putin verstehers, people who understand Putin and who try to empathize him. What's the difference between the first and the latter? Are these the same people or the same ideological group?
Not the same, but there is some common elements, and there is clearly an affiliation, a follow-up. Anti-Americanism, the hate of America as itself. Anti-liberalism, the hate of liberalism as itself. The despise of democracy, the scorn of democracy. For example, these three elements are completely common to the post-Stalinian ideology of these long time ago 70s, and those who today are pro-Putin. They share these three things. In France, for example, they are not properly pro-Putin, maybe not. Some of them are pro-Putin, number one. Some of them are bought by Putin. They are on the pay list of Putin, but some are just anti-American. Mm-hmm. They hate all that America embodies, or the best of America at least. They hate that. They hate democracy, they hate free speech, they hate transparency, they hate equality, gender equality between women and men. All that part of America still embodies today. So you have some people who, because they hate that, embrace Putin or find that Putin is not wrong, or find that Putin is a man who in the world of today had the virtue of resisting America, American imperialism and so on. Those pro-Putin of today, they continue, for example, to believe that imperialism is American, mm-hmm. which is completely stupid. Imperialism of today is Russia. Imperialism of today is China. Imperialism of today is Iran. They are imperialist. America is finished. It is not imperialist. Even, I'm not sure that America has even been imperialist, by the way. There is a quote of a very famous philosopher who said that the American imperialism at the middle of 20th century was an self-impeached imperialism. Mm-hmm. You know, self-impeached. It has never been. America has never practiced a sort of open imperialism, going to foreign countries in order to loot them, to steal their resources. It's not that, or to colonize. America has very rarely done that. Russia does it, of course. Russia is a pure imperialist country, and the war in Ukraine is a neo-imperialist and neo-colonial war.
Just to continue your idea, really a lot of people in the world, not only in Europe but especially like in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, consider America to be the imperialist evil, and usually they use all the humanitarian invasions, all the humanitarian operations, all the wars that were started with America or by America, to prove that like America is the gendarme of the world. You had the reputation of the ardent supporter of all those operations that could have brought democracy to different countries, to Iraq, to Libya, and so on. Do you think now that like every time you were a proponent of all those operations, that was the right position? Are you still standing on the same ground?
Wait a minute. First of all, you have too many questions in one question. In Africa, in Asia, those who say that the imperialism of which they are victim is America are just blind. In Africa, for example, they don't see, apparently, that African resources today are stolen by China. It's Chinese companies who really are stealing Africa. They are blind to the activity of the Wagner group, the real neo-colonial death squadrons, as we had in France 2 centuries ago in Algeria. Mm-hmm. It is Wagner, it is Russian. So the real crude, rude violent, barbaric imperialism today in Africa, for example, it is exerted on the economic side by China and on the military side by Russia. This is crystal clear. Those who don't see them, who don't see that, it's a pity. And that's why I try to say that even if America is not paradise, far from it, and there is a whole part of America which I don't like, but they are not those who colonize today Africa. Mm-hmm. One point. About the wars engaged by America in order to promote democracy. You quoted two, Iraq and Libya, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Iraq.
And there is Yugoslavia also.
And Yugoslavia, okay. It's different for me. Iraq, I never supported the war in Iraq. Mm-hmm. I was always against. I said that it was badly grounded on lies, that there was not a popular demand, support and demand for it. For many reasons, I was at this time against the war in Iraq. Mm-hmm. Okay. Libya, I was favorable, more than favorable. I even tried to help and to convince, for example, Hillary, French president, and American president through Hillary Clinton and even Barack Obama. Why? Because the idea was not to colonize Libya. It was not even to promote democracy. It was, number one, to stop a massacre, to stop a carnage, and number two, to help those who believed in democracy inside Libya, mm-hmm. to extend to them a brotherly hand. This was the idea, not to impose democracy, not to force the Libyan people to embrace democracy. Mm-hmm. It was to
unlike Iraq.
Yeah. Unlike Iraq. It was to show to those, the ladies, the men who embraced the ideals of democracy, to show that we were not deaf, mm-hmm. that we were not on the side of the dictator, to show that the West was not systematically favorable to the existing order, you know, because this is true. The West very often in the past, not colonization, but just we are happy with the devil we know. Mm-hmm. This has for a long time been the position of the West. The devil we know. We are happy with that. Mm-hmm. We don't want to take risk. In Libya, you had huge numbers of people who wanted no longer the devil they knew. They wanted to try democracy. They wanted to try liberty. My position at this time was those who want to try, we cannot tell them no. Mm-hmm. We cannot close the door. We cannot help Gaddafi. That's why I was in favor of this intervention in Libya. Yugoslavia, it's something else. Bosnia-Herzegovina. American planes at the end of the day, at the end of 4 years of a savage siege of the city of Sarajevo, they decided to act. 4 years of massacre, 4 years of a European city, Sarajevo, bombed by cannons from the hills. The West did not do anything. We just attended the show for 4 years and a half. At the end, Chirac, French president, Clinton, American president, decided not to colonize Bosnia, not even to accept them in Europe, alas. They just decided to stop the carnage. Mm-hmm. And they did it in a few days. They imposed silence to the cannons who were exerting terror on Sarajevo. Of course, I was in favor of that. I was asking that since the beginning. Mm-hmm. I was in Sarajevo, I remember April 1992 for the first time, at the beginning of the war. And I went back and forth many times. I was praying for this intervention, humanitarian intervention in favor of refusal of barbarity. That was it. Save the bodies. Save the bodies. the bodies of the citizens of Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Those people who follow you on Twitter know that for the last, don't know how many years, you are in Ukraine. You are writing about Ukraine. That's the place where you always go. Like, I don't know which global intellectual visits Ukraine as many times as you do. You recently said that you think that the West must have been tougher on Putin, and actually you were calling for the Western support to Ukraine from the beginning. You delivered a speech on Maidan in 2014. You were calling for Marshall Plan for Ukraine in 2014. So tell me, please, which mistakes have the West made during all those years, and how the West should have reacted to Putin?
Naivety, first of all. They could not imagine what Putin could do. Naivety. And an ideology, which is the idea that free commerce, economic interconnection can appease the beast and can stop a dictator or a fascist. This was the idea. This was the idea. The idea was that if we made a lot of commerce, if we created some links, some pipelines, some Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, and so on, this will imprison Putin in a jacket, in a camisole of economic ties. It was a built ideology, not only weakness, and it was just false. Putin did not care.
Yeah, that was the ideology that helped, in a way, to end the Cold War. Like the more the Soviet Union became
No. What helped to stop the Cold War was the dissidents. Was the protest of the brave ladies and gentlemen who went in the streets since long on the Red Square, Natalia Gorbanevskaya in the 70s. Those are
68. That was
68.
1968.
68.
Ironically, the same year.
So this is what disrupted the Soviet Union. It is not the economical links, of course not. It is the Catholic Church, Pope John Paul II, and it is a tough guy called Ronald Reagan, and it is the movement of ideas in Europe of people who, like young me, said that we had to stop with this complicity with the post-Stalinist ideology. It is not economy which brought the Soviet Union. It is ideology, politics, and courage of the dissidents, of Sakharov, of Pliouch, Leonid Pliouch, Vladimir Bukovsky, so many of them who were great men and women.
As you started talking about Soviet dissidents, you used to be the admirer, as far as I know, of Solzhenitsyn, and you, in many of your works, wrote that he changed your mind. He was the writer who influenced you, and you called him the Dante of the 20th century, who showed us the hell of the 20th century. How did you change your mind on Solzhenitsyn now, knowing all of his later works, all of his works about how we should manage Russia, and his ideas that Ukraine is the sacred part of Russia and it should belong to Russia, and now provided all the attitude to Solzhenitsyn from the Ukrainians?
As often, you have two Solzhenitsyn, the artist and the ideologist. I don't like the ideologist, the ideologue. I don't like him at all. The artist, the writer, the great writer of the archipelago of Gulag was somebody completely different. This happens. In French pantheon of culture, you have some case like that, like Solzhenitsyn. He is not one block. Solzhenitsyn is not a block. You have really a schizophrenia. What changed my mind 50 years ago, 45, was the reading of one book, Archipelago of Gulag. And I maintain today that Archipelago of Gulag, this monster book, this huge book, really opened the eyes, did open the eyes of many of us, many of the people of my generation who saw without seeing, who saw without imagining, without believing. You know, there has been generation of people who said, who wrote books about the Gulag, about the camps in Soviet Union. It was just essays. It was just suddenly Solzhenitsyn came with one book, which was inspired, which was full of spirit, and it became clear. That is the positive role which Solzhenitsyn had for the West and for myself. After that came the Grand Slavic Solzhenitsyn, the Grand Russian Solzhenitsyn, the Solzhenitsyn who supported some ideas which lead us to the situation where we are. And this Solzhenitsyn, I broke with him. I wrote a piece in a French newspaper called Libération, which was called Adieu Solzhenitsyn, goodbye Solzhenitsyn, farewell Solzhenitsyn, saying exactly this was in the beginning of the mid of the 80s, maybe 83, 84. He said that.
Now we usually we frequently hear the ideas that many people in the West and especially in Ukraine claim that Russian culture is imminently imperialistic, and no matter what they say, what they think, they are imperialist. What do you think of that approach?
I understand that some Ukrainians say that. I understand that when you suffer in your flesh, in your family, in your body of this invasion of today, of course you have the tendency, natural tendency to say that. It is like we had the same debate after World War II among the relatives or the survivors of Nazism, the relatives of the victims of Nazism or the survivors of Nazism. A lot of them said, we don't want to have anything to do with German culture, finished, over. Even those who practiced German philosophy, who had bred with Hegel, Fichte, Schelling, they said, we don't want even to speak, to hear the German language. This was a very strong current, and I understand that. It's absolutely understandable. And you had others who said, after World War II, German language was of course the language of the executioners, but it was also the language of the victims. A poet called Paul Celan said that. He said it was both. German language was also the language of the victims. Should I stop listening, speaking this language because it was also practiced by the executioner? Good question, said Celan. Real debate, but I say no. I will continue to fight inside the German language against the seeds of barbarity which have been put and who have bloomed because of Nazism. Same debate for Russia. Russia today, of course, the mainstream of Russian culture today is imperialist. Of course, you have apparently a majority of Russians who support this war. At the beginning of the war, at the time of Bucha, it was not a majority, it was a huge majority who supported the war, who did not express any word of dissent, and not only because it was difficult, because they did not believe, they did not think it. They were supportive of the Russian nationalism. So this is probably the mainstream, I suppose, of Russian culture today. But I know that you have some free voices, you have some free spirits, you have inheritors of Nemtsov, Boris Nemtsov. You have people who are followers of Navalny. You have people who listen to Muratov, the director of Novaya Gazeta. These people also speak Russian. These people also are fed with Herzen, Tolstoy, Chekhov, people who wrote in Russian. So it's an existential, cultural, and metaphysical debate. My personal position is that if I spoke Russian, which is not the case, I would say I have to fight, I will try to fight inside the Russian language with the Russian words against the ideology of crime which has invaded the Russian language and the Russian culture. This would be, I suppose, my position.
Mm-hmm. You said a number of times that the intellectuals bear the responsibility for the crimes of the regime, of their countries, of their states. So probably are we coming to the conclusion that Russian intellectuals failed and they are like they could not even prevent it, they could not foresee the tragedy that has happened?
They foresaw the tragedy, they foresaw for sure, but they failed. Yes, they lost the battle. They lost the battle of ideas. You have some brave journalists, brave intellectuals in Russia who certainly saw the disaster coming, who tried to say it, but they were not listened to. What is the name of that? A political defeat, ideological defeat, as the Germans who in 1928, 29, beginning of the 30s, the German intellectual who said that a disaster was coming. Mm-hmm. They were not heard. They had to take exile to continue to fight from outside. But these sort of battles, you never lose them forever. You lose them, and the time comes when you take your political revenge. So, the game is not over.
Mm-hmm. Let's come back to Ukraine. You are watching the transformation of Ukraine very closely. And you made a documentary in 2020 about the Ukrainian army, and if I'm not wrong, you claim that the Ukrainian army has changed a lot. So could you briefly explain what happened to Ukraine? Which path Ukraine managed to overcome during the last 8 years to become that unified and victorious nation as it seems to be now?
You know, Ukraine has just become a normal country with a normal army. Ukraine was disarmed by the Memorandum of Budapest. When Ukraine...
The nuclear arms were...
Yeah, but it was a spirit. The nuclear devices were sent to Russia, but the spirit of Budapest meant that Ukraine resigned all believed in the goodwilling of Russia, believed in the protection of the West, and disarmed itself, more or less. What happened in 2014 with Poroshenko, then with Zelensky, is that Ukraine restarted to do normal task of a normal state to rearm itself. And when Ukraine rearms itself, Ukraine is not Monaco. Ukraine is not Liechtenstein. Ukraine is a great country with a great tradition and with a great military tradition. Red Army, the Red Army, was not only Russian, it was Russian and Ukrainian. The first Ukrainian front which liberated Auschwitz and many other places, it was Ukrainian, mainly Ukrainians. The first Ukrainian front, which was a big body of the Red Army in 1943-44. It was mainly composed by Ukrainian soldiers. So what I want to say, that Ukraine, after the parenthesis of the dream of the end of an end of history, there was a parenthesis, end of history. We are, our neighbors are nice, Russian. Our other neighbors, the West, are protective. That was his dream. They just reconnected with their own past. And they built an army. They built an army which was not uneasy to do when you have the past which Ukraine has. During this Patriotic War, which Putin claims always, Putin pretends that Russia was the only one who should be credited for the Patriotic War. No. A big part of the victories of the Second World War, a great number of great achievements, a great number of acts of heroism, a great deal of the liberation of the world from Hitler has to be credited to Ukrainian army also. So Ukraine re-nodded, reconnected, relinked itself with this past.
You know a lot about Ukrainian politicians. You were very friendly with former President Poroshenko. You first interviewed President Zelensky before he became the president. Did he change his mind on Zelensky? Because initially it seemed to me that you were more supportive of Poroshenko as a more solid and serious politician. And what can you tell about the transformation of both?
Both, which is?
Poroshenko and Zelensky.
Poroshenko, I don't think he transformed himself. Poroshenko has been a good president for Ukraine. He's the one who built the founding stones of this new army. He has to be credited for that. He was just defeated in a democratic election. In a fair, loyal, and democratic election, he was defeated, but he did not change. He's the same. Zelensky, it is true that at the beginning, as many people, as most of the people in the West, I was doubtful. I did not know, would he be Reagan or would he be Beppe Grillo, the Italian, we did not know. What I must say is that when I saw him, I wrote it after that, when I saw him, I changed my mind. I was pretty convinced that if he was elected, he might become a real good and actually great president. When I met him, I changed my mind. Before, of course, an actor pretending to be a president, this is not ordinary. Honestly, and when you don't know the man, you may have doubts. But I was not part of those who. You had a lot of people in France and so on who said from the beginning it will not work. When I went out of my first meeting with Zelensky, for example, this is in my film on Ukraine, I called French President Macron And I told him, there is a guy here, a young man, who is going to make it, who is rather incredible, and you should receive him in emergency, which Macron did. This is in the film Why Ukraine. You have the scene. So Zelensky was already Zelensky. What happened is that Zelensky became Churchill. This is another story. And this was unexpected, as the war in Ukraine was unexpected for most of the people except me. I knew, except some of us like me. And what was unexpected is the incredible reflex, behavior, courage, heroism of Zelensky. This is never expected from nobody. General de Gaulle, nobody knew he would become General de Gaulle. Churchill, old politician with a lot of big past, long past, nobody knew he would become Churchill. Zelensky, same. He became the new young Churchill.
What future do you expect for Ukraine after the war? Hopefully it will end soon. Do you believe that Ukraine can? Do you believe in a real Marshall Plan for Ukraine, that the West will figure it out? Do you believe in the democratic development for after-war Ukraine?
Number one, I believe in reparations. What will remain of Russia will have to repair the harm it did. Reparation, first of all. Second, it will not be enough because Russia will go out of this war as a ruined country, alas, for Russia and for Russian people. But what will remain of Russia will have to pay. But number two, it will not be enough. So the West will have to provide. And this will have to be a Marshall Plan. I think that the West is ready for that. The West knows that the attack on Ukraine, against Ukraine, is an attack against democracy in general, the West in general, and humanity in general. A crime against humanity, what does it mean? It means that when one is targeted, it is the humanity in general which is reached. You know, when you target one man, crime against humanity means that all humanity is concerned. It is the belief, the right belief of the West now. So the West will provide the necessary tools to rebuild Ukraine, for sure. Number three, the result of this war, which is horrible and which is a pure disaster, except that you will have, after the war, a new Ukraine, unified, as it has never been, democratic, as it has never been, a new Ukraine which will get rid of many of its old ghosts, corruption and so on. So you will have a new Ukraine taking birth in the ashes and in the ruins of this horrible war. Sometimes history works like this. You have a disaster, and out of this disaster you have a little light which sparks. And this is probably what will happen.
And what's going to happen with the ruined Russia?
Russia will go back in past. Russia has lost the benefits of the last 30 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. All the seeds of democracy which have been planted by the dissidents, which have been planted by the perestroika of Gorbachev and so on, all this is buried, will be buried under ashes. So Russia will go back, not to Middle Ages, but to its to the past. It will be very difficult for Russia. I believe to rebuild itself. It will be more difficult for Russia to rebuild itself than for Ukraine. Ukraine will enter in Europe. Ukraine will enter in NATO. In NATO, Ukraine will have probably a big role, because the army of Ukraine will probably go out of this war as one of the best of the Western world. The Ukrainian army, equipped, trained, having faced. When you have been confronted to such a war, and when you go out of that alive, you are the best. So Ukraine will go strong out of this war. Russia will be back to old age. Difficult for Russia.
I mean, is it going to be isolated, like, or behind the wall, or is it going to be divided into several parts?
Everything is possible. I don't imagine Putin surviving politically 1 minute to his defeat. You have here a dictator who pretended to bring to his people pride, and he brings shame. Every Russian soldier, every Russian entrepreneur, every Russian citizen will be sooner or later full of shame of what has been done in his name. I'm sure of that, as the German after World War II. So Putin will not survive to that. My belief is that the regime will not survive to that either. And I don't know, Russia, the Russian Empire for sure will collapse. Isolation of Russia, probably, yeah, it will be isolated. The world will be, for some time, will not trust Russia. Even if it is a new leadership and so on, there will be, of course,
a lot of prejudice.
Yeah.
Not long time ago, you were openly debating with Alexander Dugin. What do you think of his philosophy, of his ideology? Do you think he's influential? Don't you think he's a bit overestimated in the West? What's your impression of him?
Number one, he's a fascist in proper terms, not by metaphor, but I knew that, but I discovered and felt it when I debated with him. All the red lights of fascism appeared during the debate. True neo-Nazi and neo-fascist. First, no doubt about this. What is his influence, I don't know, but what I know is that he's the embodiment of something very strong in the Russian culture. He incarnates a big part of the ideologue circles surrounding Putin, more or less. He's the incarnation of that. And what I think, number three, is that he's a weak ideologue. When you debate with someone, you feel it. You feel when the body of thought resists, or when the body of thought is just a fat belly, fat belly. It is the case of Dugin. He did not resist. When I opposed him, my arguments, I saw he was insecure. He did not know. He did not really master the concepts he pretended to manipulate. He's a weak thinker. So a fascist, a weak thinker, but certainly representative of the mainstream of the Russian ideology today.
It's so interesting because for many years we considered him to be absolutely marginal thinker, to be something that is like we should not pay attention at him because he doesn't represent anything. Now it seems that we were wrong.
In France, we had the same. In the 1930s, there was a lot of morons, of second-rate intellectuals who were despised by the grand intellectuals. And when our fascism, Marshal Pétain, took the power, they were there. They were in the first circle. They suddenly appeared. Germany, Hitler himself, and all the gangsters who surrounded Hitler, they were not second rank, 10 rank people, despised by everyone reasonable in Germany, anyone articulated. Nobody gave any credit to these stupid guys surrounding Hitler. When the first coup in the 20s, when Hitler went in jail, they were ridiculous. Same for Dugin, I know that. I know that even when I debated with him 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of my friends told me, but how can you even consider such a moron, such a stupid fascist? I said, he is a moron. He is a fascist. He is probably stupid, but I know that he, alas, he represents something. Maybe overestimated, maybe not, I don't know, but he represents something. And we have to confront that. We have to give, to help those who in Russia fight this ideology, we have to give them, to try to provide ammunition, support, ideological support. So, moron, of course. Disgracious, of course, but he represented something, and we know it now.
Let's talk a bit about the future of the world. One of your recent books was called The Empire and the Five Kings, and by the empire you meant the West, and probably the United States and the West. And five kings were Russia, China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. So you considered those five forces to be the next challenges for the Western world, the Western Empire. Has your perception changed after this war, with one king probably
My perception.
maybe he's going to be gone soon, or he has become violent too early?
My perception is absolutely the same, except that the moment of truth is now in Ukraine. Why Ukraine? Title of my film. Why Ukraine is so important? Because it's the battle between the two blocks. If Russia loses, and Russia has lost, China will lose, Turkey will lose, Iran will lose, and radical Islam will lose. If Russia had succeeded, which is not the case, if Russia had succeeded, Xi Jinping would have attacked Taiwan, Erdogan would have attacked maybe Greece or Bosnia-Herzegovina, Iran would have fulfilled its dream of old Persian empire going till Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and so on, and the Sunni radical Islam would not have stopped with the Taliban in Kabul. So it is exactly what I described in this book, with the additional fact today that the confrontation takes place now under our eyes, and it takes place in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, you wrote a lot about the illiberal populists who are becoming stronger all across the world. what do you think of that trend, that tendency? Is it a real threat to the liberal idea, to the liberal world? And do you think that trend will be on decline after Putin's defeat, or will it survive Putin?
Survive probably, but declining certainly.
Mm-hmm.
After the defeat of Putin, all the pro-Putin will be weakened.
But they are not pro-Putin. Like Giorgia Meloni is not pro-Putin. She is.
Giorgia Meloni. Let's see in the future. Giorgia Meloni was pro-Putin after the invasion of Crimea, and was at least against the sanctions against Russia. Mm-hmm. Giorgia Meloni has some allies, Matteo Salvini, Silvio Berlusconi, who are clearly pro-Putin, mm-hmm. who brag with T-shirts pro-Putin and so on. So she's allied with them. So let's see. But what is sure is that it will be less and less comfortable to be the admirer of a loser, of a stupid and criminal loser as Putin. You know, you have a lot of people who were pro-Putin because they thought that Putin was a winner, that Putin was going to give back the pride of the, I don't know what, the Christian values and so on. He's just a loser, a poor loser, a miserable loser, a miserable mm-hmm. loser. So you have some people even in America who admired Putin and who now admire him in secret and who very soon will reject him as a piece of their own shame. People in Italy like this exist in Italy, in France, all the fascists in France, the neo-extreme right mm-hmm. and the extreme left, they were pro-Putin. They don't dare to say it now. They keep that very, very silent. And it will be even better soon. So the populist trend will be weakened, if not reversed, mm-hmm. by the defeat of Putin. Mm-hmm. Even his friend Orban, you will see, he will brag less when his buddy Putin will be in La Hague or in an international court.
Mm-hmm. I've read very stunning image in one of your works. You compared a modern human being to Saint Denis, the French saint who was beheaded and could climb up to the hill holding his head in his hand, and you compared that saint to any single human being right now, because we are now holding our heads in our pocket because our mobile phone is that's where our brain lives.
Our memory is here,
yes.
and this is here.
Yeah.
So like suddenly.
I love that comparison, and I think that's, you call it anthropological revolution, and I think that's probably the explanation of many political changes we have. At the same time, that's the explanation for the populist revolution, for that populist trend. So and that trend and that dependence of the population of the population of the earth on the mobile phones will not be diminished, will not decline.
Except if we recover control on the machines, except if we try to master the robot, except if we, myself, for example, my children, I exert myself to not to say, okay, I I don't search in my memory, I go on Google. I forbid myself that. When I have in a family lunch or dinner, people say that, tell me, check, Google is my friend. I oblige myself not to say that. I dig in my memory, and I ask that to my children and my closest friends. So we'll see. We might have a new generation of thinkers, of citizens who decide to take control back of their memory, of their intelligence, of their attention, and so on. You have today a humanity which suffers from attention deficit. Attention deficit, memory deficit, sophistication deficit, because we are completely like this. Look in a restaurant, when you are a big, 2 people out of 3, instead of discussing or having, expressing love or whoever, they are like this, of course. Maybe there will be a reversal, I don't know. But is there a link between that and populism? Certainly.
Yeah, probably that was the last important question, but I forgot to ask you a funny question. What do you think about your image created by Russian propaganda? Probably you don't know that you are being cursed by lots of them. They tell that you are worse than George Soros, that you are angel of death, and anywhere you appear, the war starts, and that you are a bloodthirsty person. What do you think of that?
To be cursed by Russian propaganda, for me, is a badge of honor. I'm proud to be cursed by Russian propaganda. 8 years ago, I appeared on a list of people who were banned from traveling in Russia. I was asked by French journalists, what is your feeling after that? I said the same, badge of honor. To be banned for traveling in this Russia, the Russia of Putin, is an honor for me. I prefer to be in this list than in the list of the collaborators of this infamous regime. So that's okay, And I will certainly, I take the honor, but I will certainly not give them the honor of replying to their stupid allegations, accusations, insults, and so on. Too much honor for them. I leave it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, my dear.